Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow my honourable friend, a veteran, as he says, indeed, of Sitting Fridays on this, my first Sitting Friday. And I'd like to congratulate the honourable member for Cardiff North on securing this bill and on choosing this issue. Her clear concern for the environment and also her concern for strengthening the UK's economy after the coronavirus pandemic is truly commendable. As I've mentioned to this House before, I think now is the time for promoting green investments. Their performance, quality and potential is widely documented. The environment is an issue which I know the whole House and indeed both Houses stand firmly behind, and I'm really grateful to be here as part of this debate to consider the bill today. As colleagues have said, members will be aware of the benefits cooperatives bring to the productivity, innovation and entrepreneurialism across the economy. The government is in no doubt about the added value they bring. Indeed, I know that previous governments have legislated to make the setting up and running of our cooperatives simpler, cutting red tape, promoting parity between cooperatives and companies when it comes to areas such as registration and audit. Across the UK, membership of cooperatives has remained firm in recent years, with over 7,000 independent cooperatives enjoying nearly 250,000 people and employing, nearly 250,000 people and serving over 14 million members. Clearly, cooperative values are popular among a significant cross-section of society. Values of democratic ownership, autonomy, independence, promoting a common economic, social and cultural interests of their members and of concern for the community. Without this shared ownership, many people may feel that they have less of a stake in society, in their community and in the economy. And cooperatives have historically proven their mettle. This year's annual assessment of the sector by the industry network Cooperatives UK indicates that a staggering 76% of cooperative startups are still running after the first 5 years, compared to less than half of all new companies. At a time when we're embracing innovation and entrepreneurship, cooperatives have demonstrated that they remain a productive part of the UK's competitive spirit going forward.
Would my honourable friend give way that?
I'd be delighted.
Perhaps you would agree with me, and I think she does from what she might be implying here, that cooperatives are an absolutely fantastic addition to the kind of the corporate landscape of the UK, but they are that addition because they are part of a diverse landscape of corporate structures. And actually, we must recognise that it is within the system that it is most precious to us, and we can't push things too far.
I completely agree with my honourable friend, and in fact, protecting the integrity of the cooperative model is one of the issues that I have with this bill. But returning to my opening remarks about the strength of green investments, I've made the case in the past that such investment should lead the way in helping us to recover from this pandemic. There's no point in building back to what we had before. Studies have shown the strength and resilience of these sorts of investments following from times of crisis and uncertainty, such as after the 2008 financial crisis. The bill outlines that the capital gained from green bonds is to be invested in a way which can maintain and enhance a biodiverse natural environment with healthy functioning ecosystems that support social, economical and ecological resilience. This entails that the invested capital would be centred around the green economy and climate action, including new and emerging technologies in renewable energy, transport, housing and waste management. And I would like to remind the House that these are areas of considerable government attention and investment in recent spending rounds, contrary to some of the opinions we've heard on the benches opposite today. There are too many achievements to list today, but I am going to name a few relevant examples. We have reduced emissions faster than any other G7 nation, whilst leading the G7 countries in economic growth and providing £3 billion for contracts to help develop less established renewable technologies by 2022 to 2023. We put funding into hydrogen fuel research and established the Hydrogen Advisory Council. The The Chancellor recently announced a £2 billion Green Homes grant going live this month to support the retrofitting of houses across the country, benefiting communities and reducing fuel poverty. For electric vehicle markets, a round of private capital was raised in 2018, backed by the Treasury, bringing the private sector on board and directing significant and meaningful investment to the electric vehicle supply chain. Many of these plans will bring the added bonus of generating sustainable, high-quality jobs for the green economy. And our landmark reforms in agriculture, the first of their kind in 30 years, will promote sustainable and productive livelihoods for UK farmers. Now, data shows that cooperatives do great work in many areas of the country. The government is doing a lot to remedy geographical imbalances in our economy, and I join them in supporting the UK-wide levelling up agenda. And while we seek to support the continued growth of cooperatives, we should remain mindful of the core and foundation principles by which cooperatives operate. I acknowledge the intention of this bill to protect the mutual status of cooperatives while allowing access to new routes of capital with environmental parameters on how this capital is used. However, the autonomy and democracy contained within a cooperative is one of its core strengths and appeals, and I feel there is much more detail required to explain how in practice many of these bills' ideals will function without undermining these values. To me, there remains questions of compatibility between the ability of members to vote and the demands of investors parting with their money. Firstly, I believe that cooperatives would need to state in the clearest of terms how they intend to use the capital to attract the right mission-minded investors in the first place. This is especially important when considering that the government has already increased the capital limit that can be raised from members from £20,000 to £100,000, as several of honourable members have mentioned earlier. If we are talking about an ambition to attract investments greater than £100,000, then investors are almost certainly going to demand a high level of detail in advance. In practice, it could be difficult for cooperatives to reach a democratic consensus on this detail. I worry that the uncertainty might be off-putting for types of investors and indeed the amount of money the bill is intending to attract. I also wonder about the autonomy of a cooperative after receiving such substantial levels of investment. One of the reasons for the £100,000 limit on individual membership capital is so that no single member can command undue influence as a result of their financial contribution. I think it's naive to believe that investors will have no demands or won't lobby the membership to vote in certain directions or would be satisfied paying into a cooperative, even a community benefit society, that they were otherwise not previously a member of, even with the other benefits that membership brings. And this last point is especially true when shareholders' only entitlement is, to quote the bill, the general level of compensation otherwise afforded to members. I also fail to see how investors will be enticed by the ability to redeem their shares only for the nominal value of the investment, as is laid down in the bill. If individual retail investors or existing cooperative members seek to buy green shares, there is the potential that the risk of these instruments could be underestimated or understated. It appears from the face of the bill that there is no ability to withdraw their capital, counter to the usual way membership capital is treated in a cooperative. This sort of risk, even generated from a well-intended scheme, resonates very strongly with me. And that's because in Nottinghamshire, we have recently had a huge eye-opener in how schemes set up with the greatest of intentions can go so horribly, horribly wrong if the right risk management and governance is not put in place. Now, I'm referring here to the now failed Robin Hood Energy Company, which was set up by Nottingham City Council, it's a not-for-profit company, to deliver affordable energy in a sustainable way to people living in fuel poverty. And that is a highly commendable aim. But the company's structure meant it did not have to pay dividends to shareholders. It could use its savings to universally reduce the cost of energy to its customers. They promised average annual savings of £237, all very good aims, but throughout its operation, The firm are reported to have admitted that the scheme was just not value for money and that dozens of cheaper tariffs existed elsewhere in the private sector.
Well, my honourable friend, give way.
I'd be happy to.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and she's completely right to highlight the failure of Robin Hood Energy. She might be aware that Robin Hood Energy didn't just have customers in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, it actually also had customers beyond that. I also believe it was quite popular in Islington, and quite popular, particularly in northern Islington, including with the local Member of Parliament there. Would she agree with me that it was wholly unfair that the working class taxpayers of St Anne's or Sneinton or the Meadows in the City of Nottingham should be subsidising the fuel bills of leafy Islingtonians?
Well, I would certainly agree with my honourable friend on that point, but they are subsidising those bills no more because, as he knows, the company has now collapsed and is having to be rescued by British Gas. It has collapsed in financial ruin, and the result has been a huge economic and human toll. With tens of millions of taxpayers' pounds lost, the current estimate is about £38 million. And 230 people will be losing their jobs.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I would be happy to.
I just thought that speaker just raise one other example of this that people may not be aware of, which is the Co-operative Bank, which was one of my members when I ran the British Banking Association, and it collapsed and had huge financial problems and huge governance problems, and it ended up being bought by hedge funds. And in fact, the Co-operative Bank is no longer a cooperative at all, and its debt is issued on the London Stock Exchange. But it's another example of where bad governance where good intentions actually doesn't lead to good results if you don't have good governance.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that example, and I think it just seeks to strengthen and highlight why good intentions have to be underpinned by practical and well thought through proposals. My final point is that in January of this year, the Financial Conduct Authority set in place regulations prohibiting the promotion of functionally similar financial instruments, speculative versions of so-called mini-bonds, to public consumers. The reason for this is the collapse of several providers of these mini-bonds, particularly, for example, London Capital and Finance, which ended up leaving 11,600 members of the public at risk of losing, in total altogether, nearly £240 million. So, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, although I completely back the concept of green investments, although I back strengthening the cooperative sector, I can't back this bill today because I feel there are too many fundamental problems and uncertainties within it. The green and sustainable elements of it are not defined. There are massive areas of risk for investors that are not properly guarded against. And as my honourable friend for Milton Keynes has pointed out, it also risks undermining the integrity of the cooperative model. These are not details that I feel can be ironed out at committee stage, but rather fundamental problems, which means that I cannot support the bill today.
Chris Green.